everybody! It's been a while since I've done a thorough step-by-step sausage tutorial, and I've gained a lot of new viewers and learned a lot since then. So today I've got an extra long video, but I am going to go over everything you need to know to get started making your own great sausage at home, all while making this delicious smoked venison sausage that everyone's gonna love. So let's get started. When you're making your own sausage, you can use just about whatever meat you like, as long as you get the fat content right. If you want to keep things simple, pork shoulder that hasn't been over trimmed and chicken thighs are two meats that have an appropriate fat content on their own. In this case, I have venison, which is lean enough that I consider it a zero fat content meat, so I need to add in fat. And pork belly is my favorite fat to use because it's easy for me to find and I think it's more succulent than beef fat. Pork back fat is also good to use, but you generally want to avoid the very soft lard because it melts at a lower temperature than the harder fat and can run out of your sausage before it's ready. I'm almost always aiming for a fat content of 25 to 30%. So I weigh my lean meat and then add an appropriate amount of fat to hit the target. I don't bother with separating the lean from the fat in the pork belly. I use a little bit of estimation here, but if you want to be very precise, which is a good thing if you want to produce consistent results, you can separate the meat from the fat and use pure fat. I'm not going to get into the weights and measurements here today because I'm using just a random amount of meat, which is a great reason for weighing all of your ingredients and applying percentages in your recipes. But I will put standardized metric and volumetric measurements up on screen as I go and also down in the description. I've already trimmed everything and cut it into grinder-sized chunks, and I've had this in the freezer for a little while to firm it up, and that's going to help the grinder make nice clean cuts rather than smushing the meat through. I've also got my grinder parts chilling in the freezer to keep everything very cold. I'm gonna go with one pass through the 4.5mm plate today. And when you're making your own recipes and not adhering to a traditional style or recipe, the grind is completely up to you. Whether you want to use a fine grind like this, a big coarse grind, or any combination of grinds, that's a place where you can customize your own recipes. So now let's bring out gnarls and run through this meat and fat. Salt and spice is at the very heart of sausage making. It's where you get to craft something to your own taste and express your creativity. Salt is the most important ingredient in seasoning your sausage, and in this style of sausage, I like to hover right around 2% salt content. And that is using any non-iodized pure salt. So a kosher salt or a sea salt are both fine to use. If you like a particular seasoned salt, you can go ahead and use that, but since this is a blend of salt and spice, you'll either have to calculate the amount of salt in the blend or experiment until you know how much of the product you use to suit your taste. And aside from the salt and the cure, which I'll talk about shortly, just about everything else you add to the sausage is optional. You can stick with traditional recipes and their spice bills, or you can start with a traditional recipe and either build onto it or take away from it for your own taste. Or you can go completely original with your flavor profile, and that is the beauty of making your own. I'm going with some pretty traditional seasonings in this one today. Lots of pepper and garlic and some sort of sweet herb and spice. So let's take a look at what I have here. I'm making a big, boldly flavored sausage today, so I'm using a lot of spice. And where spice is concerned, freshly ground is always the best way to go, but just use whatever suits your budget and you're gonna do just fine. First off, I have a lot of paprika. It's gonna bring in a lot of mild pepper flavor and some good color. I'm also going pretty heavy with some coarse ground black pepper, which will have a bit more piquancy than the paprika. This is Aleppo chili flake. It's pretty mild and it has sort of a smoky, peppery taste, and it really looks great in the finished sausage. And this is some fresh garlic. Granulated garlic works great, and you won't really be able to taste the difference, but fresh garlic is more fragrant, and you might be able to notice that. If you use granulated garlic, just cut the weight by half as opposed to the fresh garlic, because it is more concentrated than fresh garlic. And now for some background notes, I'm gonna add a small amount of marjoram and the same amount of fennel seed. Now, these don't look like the same amount, but this is just much more light and fluffy than this. But they both weigh the same. And I'm also going to use a bit of white sugar because I like the way it plays with smoke flavor. And I think that should make for a very nicely seasoned sausage. Now, another essential ingredient for me when I'm making a smoked sausage is curing salt. The sausage is going to spend a lot of time in the danger zone where food poisoning bacteria love to grow, and this cure is going to prevent that from happening. So I wouldn't risk making this type of sausage without it. Now this is paint cure number 1, also known as Prague powder number 1 or Instacure number 1, and it goes into your sausage at a content of 0.25% of the weight of the meat. The amount of time that it takes to cure ground meat is a matter of great consternation on the web, and that may have to do with 2 factors. The cure prevents bacterial growth, as well as preserving color and imparting its own flavor to the meat. And in ground meat at least, these processes don't always work on the same timeline. As far as bacterial growth goes, in a finely ground sausage like I'm making today, the cure's gonna do its job pretty quickly. By the time I get this stuffed and hang it to dry for a little while and then low temperature smoke it for a while, it will have done its job in that regard. However, it's not going to work out as well for color development and flavor development. So I put the meat mix in the refrigerator overnight to get the full effect. If I were making a very chunky, coarse sausage, I'd let that go for up to 24 hours, depending on the grind size. And over the cure time, your meat is going to get very firm, and it will be more difficult to stuff the casings, especially smaller casings like snack stick casings. If it's too firm, you can try and regrind it right before stuffing, maybe add a little bit of water to loosen it up. Or, depending on what type of casing you're using, you can stuff the sausage before the cure time and let it cure in the casing. Now, some casings will break down if you use that method, so know your casings before you try it. Now I'm using some binder. It is optional and there are many varieties, but I like non-fat powdered milk due to its availability at just about any grocery store. A fine ground powdered milk is better, and you can wazz this stuff around in a food processor to get it there, but honestly, I usually just use it right out of the box and it does pretty well. And finally, I'll add some liquid to help tie everything together and make it a little easier to stuff. And this can be water or wine. For some reason, I always seem to have some beer around, so I often use beer, or just about any liquid that's not too acidic. You wouldn't want to go with straight vinegar. Or a juice like fresh pineapple juice that has an enzyme in it that'll break down your meat. Pineapple juice can be delicious in sausage, but you want to either use the stuff out of the can or heat it up and let it cool down before you use it, and that'll neutralize the enzyme. Fresh ginger root has the same effect, and you can also heat that up to keep it from mushing up your meat. So now I will mix all the dry ingredients together, and I think this time I will blend the garlic with the liquid to get it all broken down and help that distribute nice and evenly. Now it's time to get the meat and the spices down into the mixer and blend this one together. And whether you're using a mixer like this or a stand mixer or doing it by hand, when you're making a smoked sausage, you want to mix it together long enough and thoroughly enough that it becomes shaggy and very sticky, and that's going to take some time. But that's what's going to let you know that you got a good bind in your meat. And from the time you start gathering all your spices to here where you mix them together, you're gonna start catching smells, and that might give you some ideas of something else you might want to add into your sausage. And that is awesome. That's what you want. Just follow your nose. It always knows. Now that looks like we're getting there. You can see when I turn it over how kind of shaggy that looks. And if I grab a chunk out of here, it should be, oh yeah, very, very sticky. So that is gonna do, that sausage is gonna bind together very well. Whew, but that is some work. And while your meat is curing, you want to store it in a non-reactive container, so plastic or glass. Stainless steel is also okay, just never aluminum or common steel, of course. So I'll get this covered up, and I'll get this into the refrigerator overnight, which should give me just about enough time to clean up. But in the meantime, let's take a look at casings. Here are just a few of many options for casings. These are some non-edible fibrous casings that I would use if I were making a summer sausage or some other semi-dry sausage. These are edible collagen casings that I would use for making a snack stick. But for this one, I'm using natural hog casings. And these come packed in salt, so you need to rinse them and soak them in cool water overnight. But if you slip up and forget to do that, you can soak them in kind of lukewarm water for about an hour before you stuff the sausage, and that usually gets the job done. And the hog casings do have the strength that they'll hold up if you want to stuff them right after you mix everything and then cure the whole sausages overnight. And the same thing goes for the fibrous casings. I am not sure about these particular collagen casings. They're pretty thin, and I think they might get too weak if you do that. But I haven't tried it, so I can't say for certain. Bright and early on another beautiful sausage Sunday, and it is time to stuff and smoke the sausage. And this is a fairly long process, so you want to get an early start on it. Let's take a look at what we have here. Of course, we've got the cured meat, and this is very firm now, as was expected. We've got our casings that have been hydrating overnight. And of course I have the stuffer. Now these casings are 32 to 35 millimeters in diameter, so I am using a 20 millimeter stuffing horn. And I always use a horn that is significantly smaller than the casings that I'm stuffing, and that'll help prevent overstuffing the casings. The closer the size of the horn is to the casing, the more mix goes in at once, and it fills it very quickly. With a smaller one, you can kind of meter that out, and it gives you a little bit more control. So I'm gonna take my casings over to the sink and run a little water through them just to rinse them out. And if you can get a little hose bar with an adapter to screw that into your faucet, it is a really handy tool. Now let's get the stuffer loaded up. You want to get a nice scoop of your meat and then pack it. Get it packed and kind of smoothed out. The idea here is to work out as many of the air pockets as you can. You're not going to get them all. It's inevitable you'll get an air bubble here and there. And that's why we've got a little corn pop.
Corn pop was a bad
Take care of those air pockets. So once you get a nice smooth ball packed up, launch that sucker down into your stuffer with a little heat on it, and then push it down all around the edges. Again, you're just trying to get as much air out as you can. And if you flatten out the surface of that thing down in there, then the next ball you chuck in will sit on it more smoothly and trap less air between them. Oh, get that packed in there and then just go at it again. Now let's pick out a casing. Any casing will do. And you are more than likely to have some incidents while you're stuffing your sausage, so it's a good idea to have a few extra casings hydrated and ready to go. And these are natural casings, so the ends are not necessarily going to be clipped evenly, which is something that might help you get those on the horn if you just take the very end and make a nice clean cut. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it can help you out. Now, I like to put a little bit of water on the horn and just get that thing opened up and slide her on there. And it should not be difficult to get your casing onto the horn. If it's very difficult, too tight, use a smaller horn. Now, I like to leave just a little bit of a tag end on there, and I'll start by letting the air blow out of there real slow until I see the meat start to come out. The meat just started to come out, squeeze the rest of the air out, and then I'll kind of pinch the tag end just a little bit and hold the casing on there until I get the right amount of meat in the casing to start it, and then I'll let go and start cranking away. You're not holding the casing on this tube as much as you're just kind of guiding it. Very gentle pressure. Let it flow. If you pinch down on it, you're going to get more meat in the casing, which you might want at certain points. So you just kind of adjust the pressure with which you're holding the casing onto the horn as you go, and generally it's very light, just enough to keep the whole casing from flying off the end of there. If it gets hung up, you might have to push it a little bit. You're just aiming to be as consistent as you can. And then I leave a little tag end on the end as well and whip that off, and it should be pretty soft and not tight and real shiny. That way it's going to make it nice and easy to create your links without any breakage. Now let's form our links, and this should be pretty easy to do as long as you haven't overstuffed that casing. So the first thing is to decide how long do you want your link. So just grab that section on the end, hold on to the tag end, and pinch it all the way through at the length where you want your link. And that should pinch through nice and easily if you haven't overstuffed the casing. Then give that a few twists And I like to use the method where I create 2 links at once. And I don't usually make them exactly the same, but if you want to, you can fold that first link down, and that's going to give you 1 pinch spot. And you can fold it again, and that's going to give you the other pinch spot, and those should be roughly the same length. So then we're moving up and doing 2 pinches at once. And if you remember, you want to twist this one in the opposite direction that you did the first one. You can kind of manipulate your ingredients in there and to get them even. And there you go. Now again, we're going to move down 1 link, 2 links, pinch. And I can see there's a little tear right here, and in that case, if it's not too bad, just go ahead and leave it. It'll cook like that. But if it is bad, then you're gonna need to cut that out and throw it back in your stuffer. So it's a good idea to start making your links before you've got all your casings stuffed, because if there's something left in the stuffer, you can just add that into it. I'm gonna try and leave this. If it tears more when I spin it, then I'll cut this off and throw it back in. But now I don't remember which way I spun those. Shoot. Well, we'll give it a try. And that didn't tear. I think that one's going to be okay. No big deal if you got a link that's not great. And now you want to bring in your corn pop. Look for any little air pockets. And just, whoop, give them a little poke. I will tie these tag ends together using several knots to help keep those last 2 links tight and help me hang them. Just make sure that's not going to come undone. You're going to end up with some extra meat left in your horn and down here in your stuffer. And there are some ways to push that out into a casing. I've heard about putting some bread down in there and forcing it out, but I really never bother doing that. For me, that's breakfast. Welcome into the sausage closet and step 1 in smoking your sausage. First thing we're going to do is to dry the casings and gradually bring these up to temperature. This whole thing is going to be about temperature management. So we're beginning here in the sausage closet at room temperature, just starting to get the casing dry and bring that meat up to temp very slowly. I do have a fan going underneath them to speed things up a little bit, and once those casings dry out, we'll move them out into a warm but not smoky smoker. Now we've moved things out of the sausage closet and into the smoker, and right now it is a very, very low smoker, around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and I don't actually have any smoke going right now, nor do I have any water in the water pan. This stage is just to finish off drying the casings before I add smoke and moisture to the smoker, and the idea behind that is that very dry casings will be real thirsty for some humid smoke. So we'll let these dry in here for 30 or 45 minutes until those casings are nice and dry. And then I'll get some smoke going and some water in the water pan, and we'll start to smoke these. Now the casings are dry, so I'm going to get my smoke going. I'm using hickory wood today. I'm also going to get some water down in the water pan to create that humid smoke that the casings are going to absorb. Now, smoking the sausages happens at temperatures at 150 degrees and below. At those low temperatures, the smoke can actually penetrate into the casing and into the meat and give you a really nice smoky flavor. When you get above 150 degrees Fahrenheit, the casings cook, and the outsides harden up, and you're just going to be gathering smoke on the outside. It's still going to taste okay, but that's not ideal. And the idea here is to bring the temperature up very gradually so you get nice, even cooking from wall to wall in that sausage. If you go too quick and get it too hot, you might develop kind of an outer rind, and it'll still be moist on the inside. So we want to bring them up nice and slow. So to do that, I'm going to start these at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll let them smoke there for an hour. I'll then bring it up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit and let them smoke there for an hour. And then I'll finish the smoking by bringing them up to 150 degrees, and I'll hold them there until they look about like I want them to be. And after that, we're going to go for a quick finishing cook. We'll raise the temperature up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit and cook these sausages to an internal temperature of between 155 and 160 degrees. Now it is about 20 degrees out here today, so I might actually be able to close my smoker door all the way and hit those low temperatures. But normally I do need to leave it cracked just a little bit when I'm doing the low temp stuff, so I just block it open just a bit and I just fiddle with things until I can hit the right temperatures. Not ideal, and I do have a new smoker that I can control a little bit better, but these sausages I'm actually making for my hunting partner, and I haven't tried the new smoker out yet, so I don't want to risk it until I am more familiar with that smoker. Alright, we are 4.5 hours into the smoke time. It's hard to tell because there's no light here, but these have got some real nice color going on. Everything's nice and fat, not shriveled up, and that is what you're looking for. So, now it's time to bump up this temperature to 180 degrees Fahrenheit for a quick finish because we want to preserve as much moisture as we can at this point. And my favorite way to finish these is actually to poach them in some 175 degree water. That works very quickly. But for today's recipe, I'm going to do things the old-fashioned way. I'm going to leave them out in the smoker, raise that temperature, get my quick finish. I've put a temperature probe down into the center of one of the sausages, and when they hit an internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to get them right out of there and into some ice-cold water. We are well into the night now, and these things are finally ready. I forgot how long it takes to finish these in the smoker compared to in a water bath, because that's the way I've been doing it lately. That took about 3.5 hours at 180 to get to that internal temperature of 155. If you'd like to see the water bath technique, you can check out some of my other videos, or just stay tuned because I'll be doing it again soon. So now that these are ready, we've got to get them out of there and down into some ice water to cool them off very quickly to stop any carryover cooking. And it's so cold out here tonight, I won't actually need to put any ice in the water. It's practically frozen already. Oh yeah, check out those beauties. Look at that beautiful color on them from the paprika and the smoke. Just a gorgeous looking sausage. The last thing I'm gonna do is give them just a short hang here in the sausage closet. I got the fan blasting them, and once those casings are nice and dry, we're gonna throw them into the refrigerator and we'll try these guys out tomorrow. And by the smell of things, I can hardly wait. Take a look at that. Now that is a good looking dog. He's got great red color and it smells wonderful. A lot of garlic coming off of there. The casing is nice and tight to the meat. It's got some light wrinkling, but certainly not too much. And that is almost always going to be the case when you finish them in the smoker. It takes so long to get them to that finished temperature that they're going to lose some moisture, but that is fine as long as it's just water loss. The fat is going to keep it nice and moist when you reheat them. Let's compare this one to one that I just finished by poaching in a water bath. There you can see this one has a slightly smoother skin because it's a little more pumped up with moisture. but that's just water weight. It's not a lot of flavor. This one is going to have a little more concentrated flavor, and it's going to be a little more dense than this one, but they're both going to be great. Now let's cut open this little enchode to check out the grain. Oh yeah, that looks perfect. It's got a really fine grain, and you can see bits of fat still intact, and that is what you want. That's a result of controlling the temperature and never letting it go too high. If your sausage goes above 180 degrees, these little fat bits are going to start to melt out, and that fat is going to gather between the meat and the casing, and it's going to look ugly, and it's going to have a dry and grainy texture. And you'll be eating that one alone and ashamed. And you can also see some little flecks of that Aleppo pepper and some bits of black pepper. Of course, looks are one thing, but as everyone knows, what really matters is the taste. It's a little cold for grilling this morning, so I threw this in the air fryer. The air fryer absolutely kills it for cooking sausages. Check out that bite. Well, that recipe's a keeper. It's got the really robust flavor I was after, a nice peppery pop, but no heat to speak of. And that little bit of sugar I added worked perfectly with the salt and the smoke. The sausage is great on its own, but it'd be perfect for using in a pot of beans or some jambalaya. It's savagely delicious. Try that with a little super hot mustard. Oh yeah. Killer. This is a fully cooked sausage, so you can eat this thing cold or hot, and it's delicious both ways. This is one that I'll definitely be making again. That recipe worked out perfectly. And whether you want to use this recipe as is, or if you just want to use this as a guide to get you started, I hope now you have the tools to jump in and make your own delicious sausage. You work hard for the game that you get, and I'm always going to be here to help you make the most of your harvest. Thanks for watching. Great stuff. I almost forgot to show you the inside of this jalapeno and cheese sausage. Let's check that out. Oh yeah, nice and cheesy. Oh, that is good. Really good. Looks like I'm gonna have to do a video for this one as well. That's dynamite.